All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself because I don't know that much about you. I know that you come with good recommendations on this topic of the discussion of New Age and New Thought and that sort of thing. I'm not actually sure what the difference between New Age and New Thought is, but maybe that's what we'll talk about. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you, and we've got until 5:30 today.
Okay, great. I'm going to give a short intro on who I am and my background. Then I'll go into the New Age, basically, what is it? And I'll focus somewhat on the Buddhist and Hindu influences, since I know you just have covered Buddhism and Hinduism. And then I'll go more into it, like on the New Thought angle, since John brought that up. That would be really important to know. And what's the difference between that and New Age? And if you have a question as I speak where I haven't been clear on something, or that you really need to ask right away, just let me know and I'll answer it. But then we can have a time of answering questions at the end. So if questions come up, you might want to write them down or try to remember them, because a lot of times the questions will bring out information, I haven't shared, or it will clarify things that I've shared. So I think questions are very important. And I like answering questions. So anyway, I'm always happy to have questions. In fact, if no one asks a question, it's like, come on, please, somebody ask a question. So anyway, my ministry is Christian Answers for the New Age, and I have a website, christiananswersforthenewage.org. I have tons of articles there on the articles page. And I'm on Facebook. It's the only social media I do, and it takes up so much of my time. I was briefly on Twitter, which I found incredibly boring, and I just couldn't figure Twitter out, and I took myself off of it. It was the biggest waste of time. So everything I saw on there was so trivial and stupid. I just couldn't stand it. So, and I haven't tried any of the others really. Instagram, I sort of have an account there, and I can't remove it because I can't remember my password, but I'm not doing anything on Instagram. So I stick to Facebook. I have a ministry page there, and I have a lot of followers there, including unbelievers. And so the Lord has really used my ministry on that Facebook page, and it's called Christian Answers for the New Age. And the only things I post there are related to the New Age and the occult, which I also cover. And, sometimes I'll post devotional type things from the Bible, and that's mainly as an outreach to non-Christians. So that's what that page is about. My personal page is some personal stuff, not a lot because I don't have time for it. And I post links to my posts on my Cana page, my Facebook ministry page. So that's, so I'm on there personally, but if you want the New Age information, my ministry page is probably better. But if you want to be a Facebook friend, and if you're on Facebook and you make a request, tell me who you are, because if I know who you are, I'll confirm the request, because most requests I don't confirm. I just tell them to follow my ministry page unless I know them, or if there's certain special reasons that I'll confirm it. So anyway, my background is that I was in what is called the New Age for at least 20 years, depending on where you start counting. My interest really was back in high school. That's where I had interest. But at that time, the term New Age wasn't even around. And there wasn't really a name for what I was interested in. I was interested in some specific things like astrology and the paranormal and the use of psychic abilities. I was very interested in all those things, even though I had been exposed to going to churches through my Southern Baptist mother. My father was an agnostic and didn't really care if, his children went to church. So we were taken to various churches. We lived overseas some because my father was a foreign service officer. Basically, he was a diplomat. And we lived overseas, and we went to sort of generic Protestant services overseas. And then back in the United States, when we came back to the Washington, D.C. area, I went to a Baptist church and I went to Sunday school. I went to the youth group, et cetera, et cetera. I did all the Sunday school lessons. I went to the service. I was very faithful. I'm sure people thought I was a Christian, but I wasn't, because my idea of Christianity was that you have to be good to get into heaven. I don't know where I got that idea, but that was my idea. So I got disillusioned with that very quickly. I had non-Christian friends in high school. It made me question the fact that I needed to be a Christian. And I started thinking, I can explore other belief systems. And I started doing that somewhat in college, especially Eastern religions. I was introduced to Hinduism through a special project I did on Gandhi. That got me very interested in Hinduism. And then later I got interested in Buddhism as well. So I went on a journey, basically a spiritual journey, in those areas of Eastern religions, as well as the area of what we could call the paranormal or the occult. So I was interested in psychic powers. Contact with the dead was one of my burning interests for a while. And I had what I thought was a dead person appear to me one day when I was at my grandmother's house, of all places. And this happened very unexpectedly when I was awake. I considered it to be very special. I did not tell my grandmother about this. She was a Southern Baptist. I didn't think she would be too happy about me telling her a dead man had appeared to me. So I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anybody about it. So these kind of things happen. I had some paranormal experiences in college as well. And I was kind of known as Marcia is the one you go to if you're a Gemini and your boyfriend is a Virgo. You can go ask Marcia if that's compatible. So I would have students who would come and ask me things like that. I'm a Gemini and I really like, Charles, and he's a Pisces. Are we going to get along or whatever? And I didn't know that much, but I kind of knew these general things enough to give an answer that sounded informed. So that was my interest in astrology, was already very strong in college. So I went on this spiritual journey for many years. So I'm basically giving you a testimony here so you can see because I think probably most of you are wondering what got me out of it. Is that true? Are you kind of wondering how I got out of it? So I was very involved. I got into a group where we did this meditation every night. The group was called Inner Light Consciousness. And I got very involved in this group, and their teachings influenced me. And we met our spiritual master on the last night through the guided visualization, the guided meditation done by the leader of the group. This was not a person of flesh and blood. This was a spirit guide. And he was with me the rest of my New Age life. And the other students also met their guides. And this is how spirit guides are often introduced. They're introduced through guided meditations. Spirit guides are viewed in the New Age as benevolent beings, and there are different views of them. So some may view spirit guides as angels. Some of them may view spirit guides as enlightened people who lived many lives on Earth and then reached a state of enlightenment where they didn't have to come back anymore to Earth, and they're out there on some dimension ready to guide people on Earth who are ready for spiritual guidance. That's a very common view. That's a view I had. So the spirit guides are seen as benevolent and as wise. In actuality, these spirit guides, who are real, are fallen angels. They of course are not angels from God. These are rebellious angels against God. All my friends had spirit guides. All psychics have spirit guides. Everyone who does tarot cards, psychic readings, astrology, as well as people in the New Age, all have spirit guides. And some of them talk openly about spirit guides. It's not a secret. Mediums, for example, mediums who claim to get communication from the dead actually used to work through a spirit guide that they called a control. And they would go into a trance, their control would take over and give messages supposedly from the dead. I've actually seen this done. They've moved away a little bit from now, and now mediums talk about their guides who give them information, but they don't usually use the word control. That's more of like a kind of an old-fashioned thing from spiritualism in the 1800s, but it still exists now. So this is a whole other area that I'm talking about here that I would put more under the area of the occult. And I'm not going to do a talk on that, but I will refer to some things in the occult because the New Age incorporates some occult practices in it. So it is part of the New Age in that sense. It's a vast, we're talking about a vast area here. It is incredibly vast. And there's a huge spectrum that goes from Gnosticism through Eastern religions, through the occult to New Thought. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. So in my past, I was involved with most of these areas. A lot with the Eastern religions, with some of the occult, with a lot with the occult. I was a professional astrologer, and somewhat with New Thought, which wasn't as appealing to me. So I had some of the ideas from New Thought, and I'll tell you what that is later. So that's what the New Age is. It's kind of a mishmash. And I define the New Age as a network of beliefs. Okay, so that's very important. It's not one belief, it's a network of beliefs that stem from Gnosticism, Eastern religions, and New Thought. That's how I define the New Age. And of course, you know, the definition kind of, then people see that and they say, okay, but what's New Thought or what's Gnosticism? So I'm going to go through that. But what happened with my life, to finish that up and get on to the New Age, I became a professional astrologer. I had to take a 7-hour exam. It was very difficult. I passed it. Astrology is actually very complicated, and it involves math, and you have to compute the chart mathematically to pass the test, and then you have to interpret a chart. Of course, I took astrology classes first, and then I took the exam in Atlanta, Georgia. This was all in Atlanta, Georgia, where I went after college. So I was in Atlanta, Georgia. Some of my friends from college lived there, and I was living with 3 of them in a townhouse. Later, I was married, and that's when I started taking New Age classes. My husband at the time, who is now dead, was not into any of this at all. He was not a Christian, but he was not into what I was into. He thought it was very bizarre and weird, and I couldn't even talk to him about it. So I really got into it though. And so I had this spirit guide. I took Tibetan Buddhist classes, and I learned how to do Tibetan Buddhist meditation. Then I got into Zen Buddhism, and I stayed in Zen Buddhism for 12 years. And I did Zen Buddhist meditation pretty much every day. And that is the meditation that is now so popular in this country, called mindfulness. And mindfulness is not secular. It is not spiritually neutral. It is not a psychological technique. It is a Buddhist meditation. I have 4 articles on it on my website. So if you want more info, I've done whole talks, 60-minute talks on mindfulness. So you can Google that, or you can read my articles, or you can ask me a question at the end. But it's really too big a topic for me to take too much time on, except I do want to make you aware of the fact it is a Buddhist form of meditation. It is not compatible with Christianity at all. And it will affect your thinking. It's a mind conditioning is what it is. So, and all Eastern meditation is like that. And Hinduism, I was actually into Hinduism before I was in Tibetan Buddhism. So I skipped over Hinduism, sorry. Because I really got into that. I believed in reincarnation. And I'm sure you all learned about that, right? Reincarnation. I believed in that. I do have an article on reincarnation and on karma on my website. So I believed in reincarnation. I didn't believe in the Hindu gods. I saw them more as sort of symbolic, but I was into some of the Hindu thinking about the soul and the body and how we're going to be reincarnated and how you're spiritually evolving through many lives. And that idea is very much a part of the New Age. And so I had that belief when I went into Buddhism, and Buddhism has rebirth. It's a little different from Hinduism, which maybe you learned, but I kind of adopted some of the Buddhist ideas as well. So I believed that, you know, we're really part of this bigger Buddha nature or the Buddha mind, which is all that exists, and we'll all go back to that. And that was kind of my concept of God. But then I also believed that Jesus was an enlightened spiritual master who came to earth as the avatar of the age of Pisces. So here I have the astrology Jesus and the New Age Jesus and sort of a Hindu Jesus, all wrapped up in one Jesus, the New Age Jesus. And so this Jesus, who was this enlightened spiritual master and had probably lived many lives, came as the avatar for the age of Pisces. He ushered in what's called the age of Pisces, which is a time, it's a 2,000-year age of, well, the way astrology and New Agers see it is that it's a time of purging, and that it was a time to learn the lesson of universal love. And so Jesus came to teach universal love. And then at the end of the age of Pisces, which is the age of Aquarius, which is what we are now supposed to be in, the age of Aquarius is when the outer teacher becomes the inner teacher, and you look within yourself. The age of Aquarius is also the time of spiritual innovation, creativity, psychic powers, gender fluidity, believe it or not, which is a really big thing in our culture now. All the gender stuff fits under age of Aquarius. Now that's really coincidental because actually, of course, there is no such thing as the age of Aquarius. This is a spiritual belief based on belief in astrology, which is false. So, I can do a whole talk on astrology, but I won't do that right now. But I'm just going to be throwing stuff at you. I'm sorry. This is just the way it goes when I speak. It kind of just, it's just all there. So I'm just sharing it as it comes, but I want to also keep a focus. So all of this was part of my thinking. I was very hostile to Christianity. I was very hostile to the idea that you needed salvation. I mean, in the New Age, you don't believe you need salvation because you don't believe in sin. And you don't believe you're separated from God. And the concept of God is very vague anyway. And you have this false Jesus. So I was okay with myself. I felt that I was spiritually advancing. I actually was kind of pleased with myself as a spiritual person, and thought I was doing pretty good, and I was doing a lot better than Christians who were so narrow-minded and they had to be told what to believe. And they were so far back on the spiritual evolutionary path. New Agers see Christians as kind of way, way back there. They're very limited. They don't have spiritual understanding. They haven't spiritually awakened yet. So that's a view of Christians from a New Age viewpoint. And I had that view. It's very elitist. Actually, New Agers are very elitist about everything because they think they have the truth, but then they will talk about love and compassion. But they don't really know what love and compassion is, but they talk about it all the time. It's actually, it's sad because they're lost, they're in darkness. So my ministry is part of it is reaching out to people in the New Age, as well as educating Christians on the New Age. So I did not want to hear about, I had a few Christians approach me and I didn't want to hear what they had to say. So I eventually became president of the Astrological Society in Atlanta. And it was actually towards the end of my year as president that I started getting this compulsion to go to a church. And I resisted it because I didn't understand why I should go to a church or where this compulsion was coming from. And I just ignored it and resisted it. And it went on for months. And I went to an astrological conference in Eugene, Oregon, and I gave a couple of workshops there. A few strange things happened there that I couldn't explain. that were very disruptive to my way of thinking. And I don't have time to share them, but if you ask at the end for an example, I'll give you one. So I went back to Atlanta and I thought, okay, I didn't call it a compulsion. I don't know what I called it, but I thought this thing I have about going to a church is probably from a past life. One of my past lives as a Christian, because I believed I had been a Christian in previous lives. And so I thought it's probably left over. There's something left over from one of those lives that I need to confront. So, so I went to this large church in downtown Atlanta and I sat in the back on the edge of the pew because I am planning to leave. I'm hearing some noise. I don't know what that is. Is it gone? Okay. I don't know. Can you all hear me? Uh-oh, I think it stopped. Has it stopped? Everybody's frozen. I don't know whether to keep recording or not. Or talking, keep talking. Should I keep talking? Oh, okay, we're back. Did something happen there? I can't, John, I can't hear anything.
I have no idea what happened.
All right, they were all frozen.
Yeah.
I heard all this funny noise and then they were all frozen. So, okay, everything's back. That's all right. It's a glitch. So anyway, I was talking about how I went into this church, right? Did you hear that part? I was planning to leave early. And so the service began and there was a group of people, procession from the back of the church, which was the ministers and the choir members. And in front was a young boy carrying a cross. This was an Episcopal church. And as he walked by me, I felt what I call this waterfall of love falling on me and through me. And I knew this was from a personal God, which is not the God I believed in, and that he was telling me he loved me. Now, I did not hear any words, but it was this, I don't know what you want to call it, an impression, a conviction of God's love that kind of flooded through me. It was very powerful. And it was so powerful, I started to cry. And I just stayed for the whole service. And then I kept going back to that church, but this was a very open-minded church. And some people there asked for my business card when they found out I was an astrologer. So I thought, well, this is good because maybe I can get some clients here. And that made me want to keep going because I might get some clients. It's amazing how God uses things, isn't it? I mean, I just look back on this. I mean, only God could have, done it this way. I mean, it sounds crazy. So I'm there in this really liberal, open-minded church because they are liberal and open-minded. So I stay. But during the services, I hear in the liturgy, I hear scripture and I hear them say the Lord Jesus Christ, and all of this was having an effect on me. And I wasn't sure what effect it was having on me, but I knew it was affecting me. And within a few weeks, I started getting an impression that God didn't like astrology. And then also some other things happened during that time that were strange and I couldn't explain, that now I look back and I know it was, God intervening and the enemy opposing what God was doing. For example, my chiropractor, who was a witch, asked me to join her coven during this time. So of course I said no, but it was a very strange experience. So then I got this impression that God wanted me to give astrology up. I did not, want to do that. So I ignored it. I didn't understand why God wanted me to give it up. I won't go through how I made the decision to give it up, but I did. So then I didn't know what I was going to do because I was an astrologer, right? By this point, I was divorced and I had a son. I had custody of that son. I had to support him and feed him, et cetera. He was, at that point, he was 8 years, I think 9 years old. So what am I going to do? I had a part-time job that a client had given me, and he was paying me well, but this job, he gave me this job because he was one of my astrology students and clients, and he wanted me to give him information on the employees, and that's why I was there. And he would give me busy work, but then he would call me into his office and ask me for advice on the employees. He saw me as sort of a psychic counselor / astrologer. That's how he saw me. But at this time, when I had decided to give astrology up, even though I was in that office, my boss was away on a leave of absence and wasn't coming back till January. And he had left busy work for me. So fortunately, I didn't have to go to him and say, I can't do the astrology anymore, because at that moment I was not yet saved and I didn't understand what was going on. And I don't know what I would have said to him. I don't know how I would have answered his questions. So I just kept doing the busy work. And then I decided to read the Bible, and I started reading the Bible. And in a few weeks, I was reading Matthew chapter 8, and I came to the account of Jesus on the boat with the disciples and the storm, and he rebukes the sea and the wind. And reading this story over and over again, there was something about it that really captivated me. There was something about Jesus in that account that got to me. And while I was rereading it, God opened my eyes, and I saw who Jesus really was for the first time in my life. I was not young. Like I said, my son was 9 years. He was 9 years old, and I did not have him at an early age. So I was not young. I won't tell how old I am, how old I was, because you'll figure out how old I am. I'm not young anyway, you can tell, but I was not young then either. And so I wasn't real old, but I wasn't young. So then I just everything at that moment, everything in my life completely shifted. I knew I was a new person. I knew I had been on a path opposed to God my whole life. And I realized, I needed Jesus. I needed a savior. I knew I needed redemption. I didn't use those words, though, in my head. I didn't have the Christian lingo in my head, even though I'd been to church before when I was younger. None of the lingo, I didn't understand it, and I didn't really know it anyway. All I understood is that I had been separated from God. I had been opposed to God. And now, because of Jesus, I was redeemed. I was saved through my faith in Christ, because of who he really is, the Son of God, the Savior. All of that kind of became clear to me. And so my life changed from that moment on, very dramatically. I eventually left that job, and eventually, a few years later, when the Lord started giving me opportunities to share about my story and about the New Age, that led to a full-time ministry. So I've been in full-time ministry since 1998, which is now 24 years. 24 years as of last month. So it's really been quite a journey. And so now I want to get into the New Age. That went a little longer than I was planning, but let me go ahead and get into the New Age here. The New Age, like I said, I gave that definition. So the three areas it comes from are Gnosticism, Eastern religions, and New Thought. There are other influences. I'm not saying those are the only influences, but those are the three main roots of the New Age. Gnosticism, do any of you know about that or what that is? Yeah, some of you a little bit. Have you ever heard people talk about it in sermons, any pastors, about, the Gnostics in the early church and how it's addressed in certain letters of the Bible, like First John, actually First, Second, and Third John, Colossians addresses it. Paul uses a phrase, I think it's in Colossians, he uses a phrase something like what is falsely called knowledge. And he's referring to the early Gnostic teachings there. It was mixed in, it wasn't Gnosticism yet. This was when Gnosticism was taking root, and it was mixed in with a lot of Jewish myths. These are not biblical Jewish myths. This is Judaism that is twisted. It's mixed in with myths. And these ideas were in the early church, and they were sort of the kernel of what Gnosticism flourished in the 2nd century. So in the 1st century, in the early church, it wasn't in its full form, but little pieces of it were there. And one of the ideas was that the material world was created by an evil God. And so Jesus would not be in a real human body, because that the human body is part of the evil material world. So Jesus just appeared to have a body. He didn't have a body. This is actually a belief called Docetism, Docetism. And you can see that I think it's in 1 John, where it says, he who does not confess that Jesus has come in the flesh is not of God. And that's a direct reference to this belief that Jesus didn't really come in human flesh as a human. And so John is saying, who says this is not of God, but he who confesses Jesus has come in the flesh is of God. Now that addresses the Gnostic heresy. It's not a test for everything, because you will find people with heretical views and New Age views who will agree that Jesus came in the flesh. So just because someone believes that Jesus came in the flesh, that doesn't mean they're believing in the right Jesus. But as far as the Gnostic beliefs were concerned, John is making a point there that these false teachers were saying Jesus didn't really come as a man. And so there's this division between spirit and matter, and seeing matter as evil. Also, in the very first, I'm just joined a Sunday school class at my church that started last Sunday, and we're doing 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And the first five verses of 1 John chapter 1 say what we have seen, what we have heard, what we have touched. And that's repeated like 2 or 3 times, what we have seen, what we have heard regarding the word of life. It's a reference to Jesus. And they're saying what we have seen and what we have touched. So there he's also addressing the Gnostic heresy by saying Jesus was really in the flesh. We saw him, we heard him, we touched him. So that's another refutation of the Gnostic heresy. I don't know if you realize it, but a lot of the New Testament letters was written to refute heresies, to refute false teachings. Of course, the whole letter to the Galatians is refuting the false teaching of the Judaizers. And the beginning of Jude, he said, I was going to write to you about our common salvation, but I need to talk to you about this other thing going on, these men who have crept into the church with false teachings. Okay, that is a huge paraphrase of what he says, but that's a summary of what he's saying at the beginning of Jude, like in the first 4 verses or something like that. So a lot of this was written because the false teaching started right away. I mean, Satan always attacks the truth. He attacks where missionaries are in other countries by sending in cults. You know, the Jehovah's Witnesses, wherever you find Christian missionaries, you find Mormon missionaries, Jehovah's Witnesses missionaries, or people from other belief systems. And then, of course, you're dealing with a culture itself, which is, if it's non-Christian, is opposed to Christ. So there's always attacks, always constant attacks from the enemy on the truth. And it started very early on. So Gnosticism has never gone away. It's only kind of changed forms. And so now in the New Age, the way you see it is a couple of ways. One, you see the spiritual is superior to the material. So the material world is a denser form of energy, and it's not spiritually, it's not as spiritually advanced. And what you have to do as a human, since you're in this body, you have to spiritually advance beyond the material. Oh yeah, the Gnostics also taught that they were real spirits from God trapped in bodies. So your body is really a trap that you have to escape from. And then later in the 2nd century, the Gnostics had secret teachings, and the Gnostic Gospels and other Gnostic writings were written, and they often portrayed Jesus as somebody who came to give his disciples secret teachings on how to escape this world. So these Gnostic heresies are still around because also the idea of secret teachings is in the New Age. And there are New Agers who are very much into Gnosticism itself. So that's a component of the New Age. And this idea that you have to advance and spiritually, the idea that we are souls with a body having a human experience. If you've heard that before, unfortunately, I see Christians saying this. This is not a Christian concept. This is a New Age concept that we are souls having a human experience. No, we're humans. We're human beings. We are human beings. Angels are spirits. We're not spirits. You know, we have a spirit, and I think spirit and soul are the same thing, but I won't get into that. We have a spirit or a soul, but we also have a body. I mean, look at the very beginning. God created Adam and Eve, and what? They had a real body of flesh and bone and blood. And God gave them life, but they have a body. And then even more importantly, look at the resurrection, right? Really the central teaching of Christianity, because Paul said, without the resurrection, there is no gospel. The bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ is so important, and you cannot find anything like that in any other religion. So the central teaching of the bodily resurrection, which shows that those in Christ will have a similar bodily resurrection, a glorious body or glorified body, right, in the future. So that is something that really stands out in contrast to other religions like Hinduism, where the body is a vehicle and you just shed the body and you come back as somebody else in another body. And this is, like I say, a lot of New Agers have this view. In Buddhism is similar. You have the rebirth. And so although they teach you don't have a self, which is different from Hinduism, you don't really have a self. You have kind of an aggregate. You have the 5 aggregates, which make up what appears to be a self. And so you think you have a self because of your thoughts, your experiences, your feelings. And this is your conventional self, they call it. But this is actually not real, because eventually everything is part of Buddha nature. So it's a little different from Hinduism, where there is a divine self, the Atman. And as a New Ager, I kind of had both views. And I know you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, they're contradictory. But see, in the New Age, you can have contradictory beliefs and you're not bothered by it, because the way you see it is, you know, either I'll evolve from one belief to another eventually, or they're both true and I'll eventually understand that they're both true, or they're different levels of truth and reality, and those two truths are on different levels, but they're both true. I mean, that's how you explain everything to yourself that's contradictory. So anyway, that's how it goes with the New Age mindset. So that's why talking to New Agers can be very challenging, because trying to be logical, I'm not saying don't be logical with them, but don't use the word logic, because then they'll reject anything you say. You know, they don't like the word logic. So, you know, but it's good to ask them questions to try to get them, you know, to deal with what they believe in a practical way. Like if they believe in reincarnation, you can ask them, well, how many more lives do you have? Or do you think you have, or do you know? And they might say, well, no, I don't know. I think I probably have a lot of lives. Then you could say, well, who's going to decide when your lives end and you don't have to reincarnate anymore? Do you decide? Does someone else decide? And they may say, well, someone else decides, or they may say, well, no, my higher self will decide, or I'll know when I don't have to come back. Well, at what point will that be? Will you have become spiritually perfect? And if they say yes, you can say, well, what does that mean to be spiritually perfect? So they don't really have good answers for any of this. And you know, if the person is willing to talk, and if you can ask them these questions without seeming, you know, hostile or like you're trying to get them into a corner. If you just ask like with an interested curiosity because you really care about them as a person. Don't try to witness to someone if you don't care about them, by the way. You need to, I don't mean you need to love them and they don't need to be your buddy, but you need to have God's love for them before you witness to them. And God will give you that love. He will. He's done it for me and other Christians many times. He'll give you this incredible love for this person where you're just so much wanting to see that person believe in Christ, you're ready to cry. You know, I mean, I'm not kidding. God will do it and he'll use you. So ask first for God to give you a love, his love for that person. You don't have to personally have a love for them because you may not be able to, but God will give you his love for him and you'll feel that. And then, you know, you will really care about them and that will help you when you talk to them. So you can ask these questions. Ask them if there's absolute truth. They usually don't believe in that. So there's no absolute truth. Why not? Well, if there's no absolute truth, that's kind of a claim to absolute truth. If you say there's no absolute truth, that is a statement of absolute truth because you're making a statement that's supposed to be absolutely true. So I don't know if you want to go that route. If you're kind of very logically oriented and you can do that, that might be good. Anyway, let me move on to the next category. So does that help you with Gnosticism, kind of seeing what that's about? Did you have a question? No, okay. The next category is the Eastern religions. Now, I know you just had these units on Buddhism and Hinduism, and that's very good. So I won't go a lot into that. I mentioned the reincarnation and the Buddhism a little bit already. I have an article on my website called I think it's called Eastern Religious Influence on the New Age, something like Eastern Influence, something like that. It's easy to find. It's the title that's like that. I have a little short article on that. And also another area besides Hinduism and Buddhism is Taoism. I don't know if you've had anything on Taoism. Have you had anything on that?
No, we haven't talked about that.
You haven't. Do any of you know what Taoism is? Have you heard of it? You do? Okay. You know the yin yang symbol, the black and white, that comes from Taoism. It actually existed before Taoism as a separate kind of idea, but it became incorporated into Taoism. And Taoism it doesn't have a God, just like Buddhism. There's no God in Taoism. There's the Tao, and everything comes from the Tao. Everything comes from the Tao and goes back to the Tao. So one of the things that the Tao generated was the yin and yang energies. So everything in the universe is divided into yin or yang. And the yin is the passive side, the yang is the active side, and they put different things under those two sides, like they put male under yang and female under yin. But by male and female, they're not talking about men and women. They're talking about male energy, like in their terms is forceful aggression, you know, that kind of thing. The female is receptive, passive. And you'll find a lot of this thinking in occultism as well. This polarity of male, female kind of thing is found even in Wicca. And Wicca will sometimes even use the yin yang symbol as a symbol for what they believe about what they call this polarity, which you also find in the New Age. So you have this yin yang thing going on, and even different foods are divided into yin and yang. And that's the basis for a diet that was very popular in the 1970s, many, many decades before you were born, but which I lived through. And it was called the macrobiotic diet. And I remember when the macrobiotic diet was so popular and all these people were doing the macrobiotic diet. I still see references to it now and then. It's not as popular, but there are some people who still do it. And you eat a certain way, and this is based on belief in the yin and yang energies, and your organs are divided into yin and yang as well, the organs of your body. So everything's yin and yang, but these two forces need to be balanced in order to have harmony. And so that's why you eat a certain way, according to your constitution to balance yourself. And there's also the idea in yin and yang. There's a book called the Tao Te Ching. I don't know if you all have heard of the Tao Te Ching. This was a popular book when I was in college. A lot of students were reading it because at that time, that's when Eastern religions were having a big influence on the culture and on my generation. And the Tao Te Ching was a book I read, and I read many times later. And this is where these ideas come from, like go with the flow. A strong tree bends in the wind, it doesn't break. You go with the flow because you go with the flow of the energy of the universe, the chi or the ki, chi, also spelled qi and ki. The chi is the universal force, the universal energy in everything in you as well. And it's flowing in you through these channels called meridians. Now, this is where you're going to come across Taoism is in alternative healing. And I want to give you a big heads up that all alternative healing is based on spiritual beliefs that are opposed to Christianity. So I'm not going to go into it too much, or maybe at all, but I want to tell you that. And I have articles and a lot of Facebook posts on this topic. So you've got meridians. This is the basis for things like acupuncture, acupressure, shiatsu, something called tapping or EFT, reflexology. All of those are based on Taoism and belief in qi and yin and yang. So if you are sick or have a pain, it's because the qi has been stopped up in a meridian and needs to be released, and that has upset the flow of yin and yang in your body. Other things based on this idea are some martial arts like Aikido, Tai Chi. Okay, and you see the word Tai Chi, you see CHI there, and Aikido is AIKIDO, and the KI is the Chi or the Ki. There's Tai Chi and Aikido are very, very spiritually based and based very strongly on belief in Chi. So I do not advise anybody to take those two forms of Tai Chi is really kind of a meditation or exercise more than a martial arts, but technically it's classified as a martial art. So I would warn against those. Those all come from Tao. So there's actually a lot of Taoism in our culture, but people don't know it. So some of it is through these martial arts, some of it is through alternative healing. Some of it is just through the idea of the yin and the yang. Now, I want you to know about that because, and I don't know if you learned this or not, Zen Buddhism, which is a particular branch of Buddhism, which is in Japan, came about as a result of Buddhism going into China and mixing in with the Chinese beliefs, and it became Chan in China. So Buddhism in China became Chan, CHAN. I may not be saying it correctly. And then Chan went into Japan and became Zen. So, and in China, it was a mixture of Taoism, some Confucianism, and Buddhism. So Zen Buddhism consequently has some Taoism in it. And some of the ideas of Zen Buddhism are very similar to Taoism. And so they're very compatible in many ways. And I was into both of these belief systems. So moving on to, I'm looking at my clock here, moving on to the third branch, New Thought, which is the area maybe you don't know too much about. Let me quickly say that there are 3 churches that came out of New Thought, and I'm sure one of them you've heard of, the Christian Science Church. Have you heard of that? Has anybody heard of the Christian Science Church? Nope, really? Maybe 1 or 2. Okay, somebody has. The Christian Science Church started by Mary Baker Eddy. I mean, these still exist. The Unity Church, which used to be called Unity School of Christianity, and now it's usually just called Unity. There are big Unity churches in big cities in the country, and I'm sure there's probably one in Louisville. There are Unity churches. They're pretty much everywhere in any area with a large population. And then the third one is the Church of Religious Science, which is now called Centers for Spiritual Living. I don't know why they changed their name, but I did a Facebook post on that because they will use the name for a church that sounds Christian. And they will even look Christian because they'll even sing songs and they'll have a service. And I did a whole Facebook post on this because this church was really, part of something else. So you have to be careful. Unity also will do services. They'll sing songs. At the Unity Church I went to for a while, they sang the Lord's Prayer. But the New Thought movement is not Christian, but it claims to be Christian. That's the main thing to know. They claim to be Christian. They use the Bible. They refer to Jesus. What they believe is, and the New Thought movement has a very complicated history. It's very complex because it started from different strands in the culture, mainly in the United States, and different teachers. A man named Phineas Quimby, another man named Anton Mesmer, from whom we get the word mesmerize. These men both claim to be healing like Jesus. These men were back in the 1800s. Quimby influenced Mary Baker Eddy because Quimby claimed that he had discovered how Jesus healed and that Jesus was using a form of science. And this is why it was called Christian Science. But it's not Christian and it's not science. That's the kind of irony of it. It's called Christian Science and it's neither. It's not science at all. It's not Christian. Oh my goodness. It's incredible how Satan, it's just incredible what Satan does to twist the truth. It's just, I just takes my breath away sometimes what these deceptions are. Incredibly, they're diabolical is what they are. So New Thought movement taught that Jesus was an enlightened man who discovered his divine nature. And when he discovered his divine nature, he attained something called Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness is the awareness of your inner divine nature. Have you all heard that term, Christ consciousness, by any chance? Yeah. It's used in the New Age because remember, New Thought is a component of the New Age. Now, I do want to say New Thought and the New Age are still distinct. They're distinct movements. They're not one and the same. It's not like New Thought merged with New Age. It still exists by itself with its own teachers, and they do not accept everything from the New Age. But there's a lot of overlap because the New Age, draws from these different areas, and they drew from New Thought. And so there's a lot of overlap of New Age with New Thought, yet they're still distinct. And a lot of people are influenced by both. And so this is the idea in New Thought. The Christ consciousness is a big idea in the New Age. New Thought also teaches that we all come from God and we all go back to God. There is no such thing as sin. Sin is an illusion. It's a deception. Sin is or they redefine it as not realizing who you really are. Maybe they might say, well, sin, if you're going to use the word sin, it's not realizing your divine nature or something like that. They might just redefine it. So you don't need salvation, right? If there's no sin and you come from God and go back to God, why do you need salvation? What you need is awakening to reality. Your eyes are closed to reality because you think maybe that you need God or you need salvation, or maybe you think that you're not a good person or whatever it might be. And this is all just false. And you have to awaken to the truth, to the New Thought truth, that you really are part of God and have never been separated from God. And then you can live your life and you can discover this inner power that allows you to do things you don't think you can do. What's limiting you is your thinking. So New Thought is very much a part of the human potential movement, the idea that you can do anything, you have unlimited power. A lot of the self-help teachings out there in the culture come from New Thought or use New Thought ideas. Tony Robbins is a big New Thought proponent who has his own mega empire of teachings. He's like a billionaire. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tony Robbins, because he started way back, I think in the 80s, and he's still going strong. He's got a lot of followers, and he will sometimes refer to God. And so some people even have the mistaken idea he's a Christian, but he's not. If anything, he has New Thought ideas, and he teaches this. You have to unleash the giant. One of the names of one of his books is Unleash the Giant Within. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this New Thought, human potential, human motivational thinking is in the church, and it's actually very, very big in the church. And I see it in a lot of quote unquote Christian books and teachers. So, I mean, they may really be Christians. I'm not saying whether they're Christians or not. That's really between them and God, but their teachings are not Christian. So you've got this idea that your God is sort of there to help you on, tap into this potential and achieve your dream. Okay, that's not a biblical concept. And that's kind of overt, but sometimes it can be very subtle, and it's mixed in with scripture. It's the deception is really bad in the church these days, guys. I'm sorry to say this, progressive Christianity is swallowing churches whole. They are being swallowed. And progressive Christianity has some New Age components to it, which is why I've been tracking it, and why I don't, that's not my area. There's somebody named Alyssa Childers who has a podcast and a website and Facebook page. I've been on her program a few times. She tracks progressive Christianity, and she has a book out on it, which I recommend. But there are overlaps with some New Age areas, and a lot of the progressive Christian leaders like some of the New Agers. And of course, Richard Rohr is not a New Ager, but some of his ideas are compatible with New Age, and he's a big part of progressive Christianity. I have an article on 3 of Richard Rohr's books on my website. If you're interested, you go to my website, go to the articles page, and then look under book evaluations. And I have articles on 3 of Richard Rohr's books, because he's a big influence on the church too, through progressive Christianity and through the Enneagram, which I understand I maybe come back for to do a talk on the Enneagram, right, John? Because I couldn't squeeze it into this talk. So that would be a whole separate talk. So New Thought is very deceptive because it can sound Christian. There's an author named Emmett Fox. He's dead. I think he died in the 1950s, but his books, he wrote a lot of books, and Christian booksellers sell books by Emmett Fox. And his books are given out in AA meetings, for example. Emmett Fox was a New Thought teacher, but he has a book on the Sermon on the Mount, which I have read through. And some of it, he says some things that are accurate. Like, he even makes a couple of good points about the Sermon on the Mount, but most of it is not true. It's a mixture of truth and lies, which makes it very deceptive. Because he actually, there's some very clear places where you can tell he's rejecting the Christian ideas of sin and things like that. But it's such a clever deception. Now, I don't think he was trying to deceive people. I think he really believed this, and he thought he was sharing the truth with people. And I think most people who do these things think that they really believe in what they're teaching, but they're deceived themselves, including some Christians who have gotten into some false teachings. So I have never seen, since I've become a Christian, and I've been a Christian now for, let's see, how long have I been a Christian? I have to stop and think. I've been a Christian for 31 years. 31 years. I can't believe it. Anyway, that's how long I've been a Christian. I have never seen, since I became a Christian, such deception in the church and so much New Age in the church. Never. I mean, it has really just blown me away, and it's kept me very, 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 very busy. So do you think you have a grasp of New Thought? Because, things that are New Thought, usually they aren't going to be labeled New Thought, just like things that are New Age aren't going to be labeled New Age. That's why it's important to understand the concepts behind them, because they aren't going to come with a label on them. And there will sometimes be talk of Jesus and God, and, so you can sometimes not be sure, like, well, what is this? If it sounds a little off or a little strange, that's probably a red flag for you to be careful and really check further. It's just that these areas they're very complex and very diabolically deceptive. So I want to warn you about that. And a lot of the methods and practices that are popular in the culture are from the New Age. And a lot of this alternative healing is New Age or Eastern. And the culture has embraced a lot of this. And that has caused it to seep into the church. And so I have seen it move from the New Age into the culture, into the church. And I've actually watched that over the years. And let's see, I wanted to see if I wanted to finish up with something. If I can't think of something to finish up with, I feel like there's something I was going to say I forgot, but maybe it'll come to me. I should go ahead and let you guys ask questions because it's 7 minutes after 5. So go ahead and ask questions.
Any questions that y'all have?
I have a question. Do you know who Stephen Van Cars is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I remember seeing his testimony and it really opened up to me, like how big New Age was. I didn't,
Yes.
it was definitely one of those like creeping kind of, like gets into places and you don't even realize it. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
Because I was aware of his testimony coming out of New Age, so that's.
Yes, I did. I saw his testimony and he has several of my articles on the website that I don't know if he runs it or he helps to run it. What's it called? Reasons for Jesus. Yeah. Several of my articles are on there. He asked my permission if he could put them on there. And I said, yes. So I do know him that way. I know who he is. Yes, he's a former New Ager who has come to Christ. Another big former New Ager is D Virtue. I knew her when I was in the New Age. I knew about her. She was an angel expert. She's the one who did angel cards. Angels are very big in the New Age. She would talk about how you can hear from your angel or contact your angel and, how the angels help you. That was her area, was this big angel area. And she came to Christ around 2017. And she now has, she's on YouTube and has a channel and has, a ministry basically addressing New Age issues. And from her background, she and I have some similar things in our background. I've also been on her program a few times. And in fact, she and I are going to record another program later this month that will be on, I don't know when, maybe in May, I'm not sure. And we both understand each other a lot because she and I have a lot of similar things in our background. Although she came from the New Thought area. D Virtue was raised Christian Science, and her mother is still in Christian Science. And so she was raised thinking all this stuff was Christian.
Wow.
So she thought of herself as a Christian, but she was incorporating all this New Age stuff and all this angel stuff that she thought was Christian. And she wasn't saved. She was completely lost. And so the Lord opened her eyes and is using her now. And she's addressed a lot of issues. So those are two people that have come out of the New Age. And it is very vast. And like I say, sometimes it's hard to recognize. It just is. Another reason it's hard to recognize is in terms of the healing aspect. Pseudoscience is used by New Age. So the New Age will use pseudoscience to try to sound scientific. And they'll talk about vibrations and frequencies, and they'll talk about things in like a technical way. They'll use technical terms to sound scientific. They'll use the word quantum a lot. When you see the word quantum, red flag, unless you're reading something from an actual scientist who specializes in quantum physics, it's probably total bunk. Don't believe these people. These are chiropractors out there who are claiming quantum science backs them up on their teachings. And what they're teaching, of course, they claim to be teaching health. They're really teaching, most of them are teaching New Thought spirituality. Brad Nelson is one of them. Joe Dispenza is another, and Greg, I get them mixed up. Okay, Brad Nelson is one, Joe Dispenza, and then there's one named Greg. Can't remember if that's his first or last name. I'm sorry, it's gone from me now. And then there's another guy who says he's Christian and has a lot of Christian followers, and he calls himself a doctor, but he's not. Dr. Josh Axe, A-X-E. Bad guy to follow. Don't listen to this guy. When I put out warnings on him, though, so many Christians get mad at me. He's a chiropractor and a naturopath. Chiropractic and naturopath are not based on science or medicine. They are based on pseudoscience. And in fact, naturopathy is mostly New Age. I remember when I was in the New Age, people I knew went to naturopaths. They didn't go to doctors. I even went to a naturopath one time. But they do not practice medicine. It is a mixture of pseudoscience and New Age beliefs. Chiropractic actually comes out of the occult, started by a man who did contact with the dead. Now, there are some people who say that there are certain things chiropractors do that's helpful. But other people say it's not based on science. But if you need, like, quote unquote adjustments, I used to go to chiropractors. I don't anymore, even though I have a bad back. If you need an adjustment, you can get that another way. You can go to a physical therapist or somebody and get it done. You don't need to go to a chiropractor. I personally do not think anyone should go to one, but I get into a lot of hot water when I say that, because so many Christians go to chiropractors, but most of them do New Age stuff, but they don't know it. They're deceived. The Christians are deceived. They don't even know it. You can't accept something as Christian just because somebody who's a Christian does it or believes it, because they could be deceived. You have to check it out yourself, because I have people say to me, oh, but my chiropractor's a Christian and he doesn't do anything New Age. Well, I kind of doubt it. And then when they tell me something he does, I'm like, that's New Age. Oh, he does applied kinesiology, totally New Age, or he does this or he does that. He's in a new kind of a New Age pseudoscience field, so he almost can't help but do something New Age, but he doesn't know it because he's deceived. And this is a result of this whole wave in the church, this anti-science, anti-logic, anti-absolute truth wave that came into the church probably, I don't know when, it was at least there in the 1990s when I became a Christian, and it has grown. It has increased. And I don't argue facts with people, but I do try to present the information. I get a lot of pushback for some of the stuff because I stand against a lot of things that are popular in the church. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to stand against it if it doesn't hold up. If it's not supported by facts in the Bible, I am going to speak out on it because that's what God has called me to do. And what do I have to lose? I don't have anything to lose. The only thing I have to lose is some people who might not like me. Well, you can't do ministry if you want to be liked by everybody, especially in this area. I'm not doing it to be liked by people. I'm doing it because I want to share the truth and to bring people who are really deceived into New Age practices out of that deception,
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the naturopathic stuff, because I know people who do that instead, and I actually had a discussion with them about it because, like, I was curious, so I looked it up, and there were a lot of connections to a lot of the New Thought or New Age specifically?
Yeah, about both, really. Yeah, you could find.
I brought it up to them, and they were aware of that, but they went on to say that it wasn't that. It was mainly like, instead of going to get a certain, pharmaceutical medication, you instead take vitamins, like.
Yeah, see there, because there's this idea of natural being better. This is from the New Age, that natural is better. I've done posts on this.
Okay.
Natural, wellness, and holistic all come from the New Age. Natural has other origins too. There's really no such thing as natural because everything has chemicals in it. There's arsenic in apples. There's arsenic in the ground. So everything has chemicals there's of course natural things that are dangerous. You know,
Yeah.
opium is natural. Okay. Marijuana is natural. You know, and of course now marijuana is becoming legal everywhere. But you know, you've got these things that are, there's nothing, and remember what I keep trying to remind Christians is nature is fallen. Nature is fallen and corrupt. Go please reread Genesis 3. The ground did not have thorns on it before the fall. You know, God said, now there's going to be thorns, Adam, and you're going to have to work to cultivate the ground. The ground's going to be against you. So, you know, nature, and then in Romans 8, it says the whole creation groans, longing for redemption. So, you know, nature is fallen and corrupt. It's not pure and sacred. The New Agers see it as pure and sacred, but it's fallen and corrupt. So we can't say because this is, and vitamins aren't regulated, and there's nothing natural about them anyway. You know, they're processed, and a vitamin pill, you can only absorb so much of that. Your body won't absorb all of the strength of the vitamin. You get the vitamin better from food. It's better to have a good diet than to take vitamins unless you have a deficiency or some kind of illness that requires you to take a vitamin, or you're at a certain age where some vitamins you need them because your body doesn't produce them or isn't absorbing them as well. But other than those cases, you don't really, vitamin isn't going to help you. And when they say, oh, well, instead of a drug, what if you have cancer? What if you have heart disease? Is a vitamin going to help you? No, you're going to die if you just take vitamins or supplements. But see, that's in the church, that's wrong. It's wrong to take drugs. There's nothing wrong with drugs. Drugs are a product of testing and research. And yes, they're very powerful. They can have side effects. Some people can't, certain people maybe can't take certain drugs, but on the whole, drugs save lives. Okay, they've saved my life. They have saved my life twice. So, and they have saved lives of many people I know. You know, I remember my grandmother telling me when I was young, because she had 5 children, one of them died at age 3, and she told me it was common for families to lose a child. That was the norm in her day as a young mother. People would lose a child. That's one reason they had so many. Well, they didn't have good birth control, but they would have so many children because often not even just one, sometimes 2 or 3 children would die because they didn't have the kind of medicine then to help things. I mean, her daughter, who would have been my aunt, died of pneumonia. Probably could have been saved today. So, you know, you go back and look at the also the age, the expected lifespan was very much lower, you know, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. The expected lifespan, I don't know, in the 17 or 1600s, what was it? Maybe age 55 or 60. You know, I mean, people live longer, but that wasn't normal. So we have a longer lifespan, and we have a lot of illnesses and diseases that we can be saved from because of medicine. And that, to me, is because it's based on the laws of creation, that God created the world and created our bodies according to certain laws that can be discovered and used. And that's what science is based on. Scientists can be deceived. I'm not saying believe all scientists. I'm talking about science itself, which is based on God's laws of creation. Oh, somebody has his hand up there.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I've got so many different questions,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we've only got like 10 minutes, but
Okay, go ahead. Try it out. Try.
law of attraction and crystals and chakras and
Oh.
just all kinds of stuff. I don't know what's probably gonna be the most important thing to talk about there, but
I have a more general question.
okay, go ahead.
So from what you said, it sounds like a lot of random things that we wouldn't assume, like chiropractics, whatever else, are coming from, you know, upstream ideological stuff. My consideration is like, at what point does it get far enough away from the original ideology that it doesn't matter that it came from that? Because you have a similar issue in the early church, right? Where people coming out of Roman paganism or people coming out of Judaism had conscientious objections to eating certain fruits or not eating certain fruits or whatever. And Paul's general approach to this was, it is clean for anyone who thinks it is clean and unclean for anyone who thinks it is unclean. which doesn't seem like he's terribly concerned with where the food is coming from or what the prior beliefs of the system were. It's more about like, you know what's what, you know that these are just cards, that the tarot cards don't have any magical power to them, things like that. And so, or you know that the Enneagram is just a fun personality system, so why not use it, right?
Or even yoga.
Or yoga, right, exactly.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you all have asked, and I don't want to bypass his questions in the back. Let me just say real quickly, I address chakras on my website, on my yoga, or I have five or six I have 6 articles on yoga. And I address chakras in there, crystals. I think I have an entry on crystals in my occult terms article. This is the idea behind that, is that an object has power, which is a pagan idea.
Yeah.
An object doesn't have power. Now I want to switch over, and I can go back there, but I want to switch over to what you just brought up. The meat for idols issue is not analogous to what I'm talking about. And the reason that it's not is because the meat for idols issue is dealing with a neutral object, meat. Meat is spiritually spiritually neutral. Okay. Meat is not good or evil, right? Meat is just meat. It was offered to the idols, and that's what bothered the pagans, because they used to do that or eat that meat. And so what was bothering them was the fact it was offered to idols. But that didn't change the meat. The meat was still meat. So for somebody who that didn't bother them, the Jewish person never ate meat offered to idols, and so meat was just meat. They could eat it maybe, and the former pagan couldn't. That has to do with conscience and has to do with the way the meat was handled. That's not the same thing, for example, as doing a practice that's based on a false spiritual view and has no validity.
Unless you're not doing it based on that view. If someone's going to yoga and they don't believe that there's any spiritual element to it, then what they're essentially doing is just making body movements, which I assume we would all believe are neutral things.
Okay, that is one argument for yoga. Now, my response to that is that yoga is, in essence, intrinsically a spiritual activity. It is not an exercise. It was never designed as an exercise. The purpose of it is not to exercise. The purpose of it is to use the body. First of all, there's several kinds of yoga. And the kind of yoga you're asking about, and which most people in this country do or ask about, is hatha yoga. And hatha actually means sun and moon. And so there's a spiritual component from the very beginning. In fact, I'm reading a book, The Roots of Yoga, here by 2 secular academic, 2 scholars who are experts on the history of yoga, and they're pro-yoga. And this book would curl your hair if you could read this. Anybody who's for yoga, any Christian who's for yoga should get this book. And you could never read all of it. It's very long and very detailed. What they did was they took the texts of yoga going way, way back, like several hundred years, even back to, I think even possibly around, I can't remember if they went to before Christ or not, but they go way back into some of the early teachings of yoga, and you can see what they're involved. It's all about manipulating energies in the body. Some of it is sexual. I can't even say what it is here because it would be unsavory to say it, but it's a very unsavory to read it, but I think Christians should know about it. It has to do with this total pagan beliefs in the use of the body as a tool for spiritual advancement. And that's what hatha yoga really is. That's what it comes from. And so the movements, also many of the movements honor Hindu gods. So my question to people is, why do yoga? Why don't you do another form of movement that isn't yoga? Why do you have to do yoga? What, did you want to ask something about what I said?
I was asking a clarifying question. So would you say it is relevant at all what the user of whatever it may be, whether it's yoga, tarot cards, Enneagram, whatever it may be, what the user believes about the thing? Does that matter at all? I mean,
No, not when it comes to that. Well, as far as tarot cards go, that's divination, and God condemns that. Tarot cards, astrology is divination. Palm reading is divination.
It's not divination if they don't think it's divination. They're just
Then why are you doing tarot cards? You're doing it to get information.
or to have fun.
I think there's a pretty big association with tarot cards and any sort of occult, new age.
I agree.
I think
like-
with yoga, it's hard because it's become so mainstream that you have people who just go to stretch.
Yeah.
Like, that's.
Divination is getting information through a hidden meaning or supernatural source. And tarot cards are based on the belief that those images have meanings. So what you wouldn't do tarot cards unless you believe those images had meaning. So right away you're buying into divination.
Except that I know people who have bought tarot card decks and played around with them who don't believe any of them.
What do they do with it?
They literally just flip it around. And it's the same thing, sorts of things that you would do with a deck of playing cards. You make up your own rules and you make a game because that's how humans work. We take random things.
So are they actually doing like a card game with the tarot cards?
Something like that.
Or are they interpreting the images just for fun?
If they're doing it just for fun, then it is without a reverence for what they find. They don't think that just because they're interpreting it means that something's going to happen.
That'd be like playing with a Ouija board, just for fun.
See, I still
That intrinsic
Yeah.
between the two activities.
But the tarot cards are designed to give you a message through the images. So if they're using it as a card game, well, then it's not really tarot cards. They've turned it into something else. Now, I've never heard of anybody using it as a card game. I've heard of it becoming more popular to be used for self-reflection, where
Yeah.
people take it and they look at the images, but the images don't have any meaning except what you see. So whatever you see, if you see a queen sitting on a throne, what is that? It's a queen sitting on the throne. As soon as you give it more meaning than that, you have entered the realm of the occult, because you have given it a secret meaning that isn't there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that disturbed me. One of my coworkers was into tarot cards and she had lined her whole mirror in her dorm room with tarot cards so that every morning she could look at all these pictures. And I asked her, do you actually like believe in this? And she was like, well, no, I just kind of do it, for my own. It kind of had to do with that more like mindfulness, just trying to like
Yeah.
really reflect on life. And I'm like, there's some problems there.
Yeah, she's looking at the images and she's getting some kind of meaning or feeling from the images. And that is occultic, because I don't get any meaning from looking at a woman sitting on a throne, or looking at, one of the other tarot cards, whatever the image may be, the Fool or whatever. To me, it's just like, okay, well, of course I know what they are, so they look evil to me. But just putting that aside, it's like, okay, here's a picture of this guy doing this. He's holding 10 sticks. Yeah, okay, what does that mean? It means a guy is holding 10 sticks. I'm not going to give any meaning to it beyond that, because that is what I did when I was in the New Age.
Right.
Can I go back to this guy real quick here? You asked a very good question there about the meat for idols. I'm glad you asked that. I don't know, I know I probably have to stop in a minute, but I don't know if I can go beyond that. But the guy in the back, I do want to make sure you understand I have that information for you, and you guys can contact me. I'll tell John to give you my email address and you can email me with questions. What was the other thing you mentioned besides chakras and crystals?
The law of attraction.
The law of attraction. Okay, I addressed that on my website, although I don't think I call it that, because at the time, I can't remember if it was being used or not. That became popular because of a book and a video called The Secret that was introduced by Oprah in around 2005 or 2006. I saw the Oprah had 2 programs on it, and then I got the book and I saw the video, and I did 2 articles on The Secret. So on my website, if you go to the articles page, ChristianAnswersForNewAge.org is the website, look under topics, and The Secret is listed there, 2 different articles. And the law of attraction is based on new thought. Now, this is where new thought, it's pure new thought. If you want something, what you do then is that you manifest it into reality through these techniques, which involve usually visualizing it, writing affirmations. I have a brand new 2023 Jaguar, green Jaguar, or whatever it is, BMW. I have it. You put up pictures of it Okay, that could be a vision board. By believing that you have it and the universe will give it to you and affirming it. You don't say, I will get it, I will have it, I will buy it. You say, I have it. I have a $400 a month raise from my boss. I have good health. I have a loving husband. Let's say you're not married. I have a loving husband. He's going to be 6'2" and have dark hair. He'll be slim. He'll have a well-paying job. Okay, I have a husband who's 6'2", dark haired. He has a well-paying job. We're going to have a $750,000 house in the suburbs, blah, blah, blah. You affirm these things and believe them, and then you can make them manifest. That's the law of attraction. It is new thought, pure new thought. And it's incompatible with Christianity. What New Thought does is they say prayer is like the law of attraction. They say prayer is where you are doing the same thing and you're getting through prayer, you're getting this to happen. But we know as Christians, prayer is not something, it's not a technique, number one, and it's not a method for getting what we want, number two. That's not what prayer is, right? Prayer is petitioning and thanking and praising God. And we petition him for things according to his will, not according to our will. We can ask for things, but we ask them according to your will, Lord. I mean, Jesus has this in the prayer where the disciples say, teach us how to pray. You know, it is according to God's will. And they misuse, and my article, besides the 2 articles on The Secret, I have an article on New Thought, which I forgot to mention. I want to let you know it's under in-depth articles. Or if you just scan my articles page, you can find it. It's actually a paper I wrote for seminary. I went to Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was a seminary co-founded by Dr. Norman Geisler, whom in my opinion was the greatest Christian living apologist, or well, he's not living anymore. He's the greatest Christian apologist of his time. And so we were very apologetics oriented. And in fact, I think Ratio Christi initially started that way.
Yeah.
It's no longer part of SES, but it started that way from SES or someone at SES. And so I wrote a paper on New Thought for one of my classes, and I turned it into an article for my website. And in that article, and in at least one of the secret articles, I refute the Bible verses that New Thought uses, because they use things like where Jesus says, you know, ask me and you will receive it, that kind of thing. You know, they use that as their little formula to back up their teachings. And I show how they're misusing it and what the response to that is. So that's a good thing to know, because you'll hear that, because people will say, but Jesus said, but we have to go back to the context of what Jesus was saying, and, the context of that and how Jesus was saying, when you ask for something, yes, but you are asking for it according to God's will, and you're asking for it. If you're just asking for something just for you and for no one else, well, God's not going to honor that. I mean, if you're just asking for it because it's something you want, even if God doesn't think you need it. And remember, in the Old Testament, it says, delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. The first part of that is delight in the Lord. So we delight in the Lord. Our desires are God's desires for us. Our desires should be God's desire. And that's the whole point of sanctification, growing in Christ. That's prayer aligns us, or should align us, with God's will, so that God's desires become our desires. And that is behind what Jesus is saying. Of course, New Thought doesn't get that because they're not Christians. They're pseudo Christians. Now, did I answer your questions there about the meat for idol thing? Does that help what I said?
That does help. I found your distinctions for tarot cards interesting. Unfortunately, I think we're pretty much out of time, but yeah, that's been very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give John my email. He can give it to you, my email address. I'll message it to him on Facebook. And I don't know, is this going to be on the air or not? If it's not going to be on the air, I'll just say it.
No, we might send it to some people, so, yeah, we'll,
Okay, that's okay. I'll say it anyway, because that's all right. It's, I get it out on my business cards. It's theexastrologer@gmail.com. So there's two E's there because it's THEEX. So sometimes that throws people off and they leave out one of the E's. So it's theexastrologer@gmail.com. So please, if I didn't answer your question or you think of other questions, you are not bothering me when you email me. This is what I do. This is my ministry. I want you to email me. So please, don't think I don't want to bother her. She's busy. No, 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 no. Please, I don't want you to think that. I want you to email me. Okay, thank you so much. I went over a little bit. There's a lot to say on this, so it's
that's
hard to keep it in the time limit.
I understand. All right, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You were great. I enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye.